Hello, my name is Cheryl Meyer, otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse, and I am a health coach. I want to welcome you to my podcast, It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health. This is a weekly show that will share lifestyle changes that you can make to support your health yourself. Why do I want to share this information with you? 7 years ago, after being a business owner for 20 years, I woke up one morning in horrific pain where every bone and every joint in my body hurt. I went to the doctor. She ran lots of tests, and then she ran some more, and then she ran some more, and finally she called me and announced she was going to give me steroids, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with me and I should seek therapy. I knew something was wrong. I hurt. So she told me I would be on steroids for the rest of my life, and I refused that I was going to have a life of pain and pills. So why was I going to take steroids if there was nothing wrong with me? So I dug in and started researching, and I turned my business over to my staff. I found a functional doctor who confirmed that I had autoimmune disease. By making a series of significant lifestyle changes that I could do for myself, 5 years later, I had returned to relative health. The best part is that I am now 70, and I feel better now than I did when I was 50. I no longer hurt, which is huge. I will always have autoimmune disease, but losing the pain has been amazing. I went back to school at 67 and became a health coach because I want to share everything that I learned with others. And I wrote a book called It Feels Good to Feel Good, Learn to Eliminate Toxins, Reduce Inflammation, and Feel Great Again, as the manual I wished that I had had when I got sick, and my book has won 13 awards. So whether you want to future-proof your health and grow old with dignity and grace without dementia and chronic pain and disease, which you don't need to get, or whether or not you already have a chronic condition like autoimmune disease or cancer or heart disease, and you want to learn about what things you can do to improve your long-term health, or whether you want to improve the health of your families and raise healthy children, because 53% of our children have a chronic condition, I look forward to sharing all this information with you. I will tell you, it truly does feel good to feel good, so let's get started. I look forward to having you join me here every week, and I want to give you hope that if you have chronic pain or chronic disease, you can make changes that will improve your health. And if you don't want to go there, you're going to be fine if you listen to the show and put these things into work. I want to give you information so that you can grow old and have a better tomorrow. So thank you for joining me. Let's get started. Hello, welcome to another edition of It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future-Proof Your Health. And the subject that I want to talk about today, and probably in a second podcast, because I think I have too much to fit all into one, is kind of a touchy subject because it seems to be a little bit forbidden to discuss this openly. And the conversation is going to be about depression. I have a family history where 2 family members committed suicide. So it's a subject very close and near and dear to my heart because of the devastation that's left on the other side with the loved ones who are left behind. But I can't imagine how terrible and fearful the person who commits suicide must be, and that they never were willing to reach out to get the help that perhaps they needed to deal with the silent depression that they had going on in their head. What brought this up for me, sorry, I always get emotional when I am talking about something close to my heart. 2 weeks ago, I interviewed someone for a Tell Me Your Story, and I will run it right after this series on depression. She was a very successful business owner. She had a very successful restaurant with her mother. And she started going under the cloud and into some dark depression. And she had a best friend, and they did not discuss depression on the woman I'm interviewing side. And unbeknownst to her, her friend was going through the same thing and out of the blue committed suicide. It shook her to her core, and it actually made her step back, start thinking about how at the end of her 30s, she needed to start doing more self-care and living the life she was meant to live, and to talk out and to change lifestyle so that she could turn around the cloud that she was under, because she was very pained by losing her friend, and she didn't want to do that to anyone else in her life. So I wrote a little prequel to that interview, and I want you to see both my prequel and that whole podcast. But it made me start to think about depression in general, because I follow the functional community, and there are a lot of discoveries of similar things that I talk about for other health issues, and how they incredibly impact mood, and how by adopting these lifestyle habits, you might actually be able to turn off the dark moods and turn on all your feel-good hormones that can help you get through it. Now, by saying that, I am not saying that you should not seek help from a medical doctor. I am not saying that if he feels it's necessary, you should not go on an antidepressant. And I am not saying that if you have some kind of trauma in your background, that you should not seek therapy to talk that out, because nothing I talk about is going to replace those things. But I do want you to be aware that you have more power over your moods and your thoughts than you might realize. So I want to talk about all the things you can do yourself without your doctor or anybody else's permission that might just make all the difference in the world to how you feel in terms of your moods. They will also make a huge difference in terms of how do you feel in terms of your health. So I'm going to start off by repeating, if you are under a cloud and you are having lots of very depressed feelings, the first thing I want you to do is seek help. I want you to talk it out with somebody who's close to you, who you feel is safe, and I want you to seek help from your medical professional, because you don't want to get to the point where you can't control it anymore. So nothing that I have to say here takes away from that. So if you feel like you're developing depression, whether it's seasonal, which happens in the winter where people don't get to see the sun, or otherwise, don't try to tough it out or suffer through it alone or in silence. Talking it out with a medical health care professional for a diagnosis and a treatment plan just might be the answer to what you need. They can monitor your symptoms to make sure the steps you're taking are treating you effectively. And a mental health care provider might also prescribe antidepressants to deal with your SAD, or the darkness that comes during the winter, the SAD disorder, or a milder case of winter blues from escalating to that point. So always know that that's available and take advantage of that. Now I want to talk a minute about antidepressant drugs, because they start out being great, but then they lose effectiveness over time. They're based on the chemical imbalance theory for depression, and they represent a $10 billion industry in the United States alone. According to the CDC, 11% of Americans over 12 years old have been put at some point on antidepressants. Now, they're the second most prescribed medication in the United States after cholesterol-lowering drugs, which are often statins. Doctors wrote a staggering 254 million prescriptions for antidepressants all the way back in 2010, and I could not find a more current statistic, even though that's 12 years old. It's getting worse. So understand that whatever that was in 2010 would be much higher today. According to a new report from the National Center for Health Statistics, the data from 2011 to 2014, which is the most recent I could find, shows that 13% of the people that were 12 or older are taking an antidepressant. And we're not just using them until we learn whatever the coping mechanism is to lift our mood. We're staying on them long term. 68% of the public that goes on to an antidepressant stays on an antidepressant. And this is where the problem begins. And 2 years or more, a quarter of the people taking an antidepressant reported that they needed more. So there's an escalation of taking a higher dosage of the drug to get the same effect. I know that mood can be impacted by a lot of different things. And so it's the part that you can own that I want to talk about today. And you're not going to be surprised because they're really the same things I talk about to turn your health back around, to get your chronic illness so that you start to heal from the inside out, to your hormone balance is part of this. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on because I'm a health coach. And the only thing that I can recommend that you make are health style changes, lifestyle changes that will improve your life because it does feel good to feel good. And so that's where I'm spending all of my time researching because I'm still looking for puzzle pieces for my own health and my own moods. Influences on mood are many, including but not limited to environment, nutrition, stress, genetics, socioeconomic factors, and other experiences in life. And these influences actually change from moment to moment, so can one's mood. Now, one of the dear family members that I lost was because he had a horrible health condition that he struggled with his whole life. And I think it just became overwhelming to the point that eventually he gave up. He was an extremely sensitive and loving human being. He did what he could for his family until he got them all through, and then he lost his purpose to keep going. And that's when he committed suicide. And my God, the fear that he must have felt had to be overwhelming. And so I have studied this on and off since I went to college. I took several psychology courses. I want to understand what happens to a person's mind when they go under that cloud and they can't seem to get themselves out. And he went through all the traditional things of the electrical impulsing, and I mean, there were all kinds of things they did to him to try to shake him into better moods, but none of it worked. At some point, he figured out, he was a chemist, and at some point he figured out that what he ate was impacting his mood, but I think he did that too late. And so it was a natural for me to do this research and to want to share it with you. The other person who died in my life was a cousin who just had a horrific upbringing. And I think she suffered enough trauma that she never got through it, so that became her only obvious choice. But it broke everybody's heart in the family, and she was a beautiful human being. So that's why I emphasize, if you have something that was a trauma or a childhood issue, by all means, find a professional that you can talk it out with, because that might make all the difference in the world. If you're like the other key person in my life who just became overwhelmed until he had no purpose and then had no reason to continue going, that could have been influenced by all these lifestyle changes. So I want to discuss both of those today. The whole field of psychonutrition is brand new. They are just starting to study how nutrition does influence our moods, our minds, and how the gut biome actually travels up the vagus nerve to impact turning on and off all of our feel-good hormones. So there's going to be a lot of development in this area over the next 10 years. But if you are currently under that dark cloud, you can't wait those 10 years. So I would like to think you will actually go grab a notebook and make some notes about the things that you can do that just could make all the difference in the world by making these lifestyle changes that you control. It won't make anything worse, that's for sure, and it just might be the trick to make things better. So it's worth the try. Mood imbalance are symptomatic of a dysfunction in the body or disease state, which may be directly related to mental health. So it's important to understand that a lot of the things that they're learning is that health means being out of order. I got out of balance. That's why I got autoimmune disease. And when I got out of balance, I was already past the point of reading my symptoms to stop it from occurring. So get in touch with your body. Know if your body's telling you that you have a symptom is a red flag saying, hey, you need to deal with this now. You need to find solutions. I wish I had done that before I went over the wall of toxic load and into the extreme pain of autoimmune disease. But by learning what I've learned, I have been able to impact my body to the point where I don't have the pain anymore. And so I know this can happen. I know that by making lifestyle changes, you can make a big difference in how your body feels physically. And the more I'm reading, the more I'm beginning to understand that we are what we eat. So that's a place to start. And one of the reasons we are what we eat is that we are what our gut bacteria get to eat. And if they're only getting to eat the standard American diet, which is loaded with sugar and what I call crap, carbonated, refined, artificial, and processed things, if that's all that our gut bacteria are getting to eat, they're angry and they're dark and they're not happy. And if they outnumber all the good bacteria, then you're in trouble, both for your health and for its impact on your mind. Because that signal travels right up your vagus nerve to turn your good and your bad hormones on and off. This may be the reason that the term mood disorders is an umbrella category for all the different kinds of depression and anxiety orders, which has been included 1 in 5 adults in the United States who are living with a mental health disorder. Depression and anxiety are the most common conditions, but 30% of the United States is actually struggling with anxiety disorder. I have a client who's dealing with anxiety disorder at the moment. And at some time in their life, they've had serious anxiety. And depression is increased by 50%, 49.86% from 1990 to 2017. So mental health concerns are continuing to grow, especially due to the psychological impact of COVID-19 and our isolation in the last few years. But also understand one of the contributing factors is that we are eating less and less real food and more processed and fast food, which is pure chemicals and pure sugar and salt that is not feeding our bodies any of the phytonutrients that it needs so that it can rebuild cells, including brain cells, and remain healthy and happy. And yet conventional psychiatric care does not typically discuss food or an assessment of metabolic dysfunction, obesity, or insulin resistance when they're evaluating and treating mental health conditions. Now, it's the same as it is with an allopathic or what I call a conventional doctor. They'll tell you you need to lose weight, but you ask them how to do that, and they really don't know because they only got at most half a day on nutrition in school when they were becoming a doctor. We are not training our doctors how nutrition and lifestyle habits impact our health and our bodies. So doctors will tell you it's okay to eat whatever you want to eat, but if you're only eating gray, dead food, you're not giving your body any of the things that you need to be giving it so that it can rebuild. Go back and listen to my podcast about the 3 little pigs, or look up my blog on my website, which is CherylMHealthMuse.com. I have a whole blog there that ran in Brains Magazine, where I am one of the top 500 contributors in the world. Because do you want to be the little piggy who's building the straw house, that's building the stick house, or that's building the brick house? Because what nutrients you put into your body make that difference. So when the big bad wolf, like something like COVID, comes along, if you're in that straw house, you don't stand a chance because you don't have an immune system that can protect you. And if you're in the stick house, maybe you don't get sick quite as badly or quite as quickly, but you're still going to get sick. You need to be building that strong brick house so whatever that big bad wolf is that enters your life can withstand it and hold and protect your body. Now, I just came through COVID. I think I talked about that in the last I've been vaccinated and I was boosted. But because I am immune compromised and because I still do have diabetes, although I am going towards prediabetes, I am still immune compromised. I wasn't sure if I got COVID, how I would withstand it. But I have eaten so well. I have learned so many ways to control my stress and protect my gut. I went through COVID in 5 days. My fever never went over 99. The worst I got was laryngitis and a bad sore throat that lasted 24 hours. I did have 24 hours of severe muscle and joint pain, which was reminiscent of the terrible pain I dealt with when I got autoimmune disease, but 5 days. The only thing that continued after that in the long-term COVID area was that I had fatigue for another 10 days. But now that has passed, and I am really very proud at how my immune system protected me as I went through COVID. In spite of the fact that I'd had the vaccination, a lot of people who are immune compromised still don't withstand it. So understand that I am very passionate that you need to eat real food, and there are several podcasts you can go back and learn my philosophy about how to eat and why it's important, or look up my blog. Either way, you'll get the gist of things that you can do to control your immune system so that you withstand whatever the pandemic of the moment is. And the functional community believes that 86% of us are metabolically unfit, and that put 86% of us at risk for COVID. And they consider that one of the reasons why we've been hit so hard in this country. So it also impacts your mood and how you feel about life. And I don't know about you, but I like being happy. So I'm really glad that I'm eating the way that I'm eating and that my lifestyle habits are supporting my mood. And I'm going to explain all the ways that you can do that as well. I'm not exactly against using drug therapy, but what I don't like is when one of my friends goes on Prozac and is told she's going to be on Prozac for the rest of her life, because pharmaceuticals are great to mitigate symptoms, but long term, they just cover it up. And so if you are going on something like Prozac, start to own your own health and do your own research and start to change all these lifestyle habits. Change them now before you ever get to that point. And then work with your doctor on how to wean back off of those medications. What signs would you have to get on your testing so that you no longer have to take those pills? And challenge him, because you don't want the downside that comes with whatever that medication is. So I want you to start focusing on the food that you eat and your other lifestyle habits. No matter what, if you are feeling depressed or down or under a dark cloud, do not give up. It will not rain forever. Know that you are loved and needed. Know that you're enough. There's only one of you that's ever going to exist, and you are quite wonderful in whoever that person is. And for every door that closes, a window opens. So the wheels of life keep turning. I used to read tarot cards. There was a wonderful card in the tarot deck called the Wheel of Fortune. What goes down will come up. So you just have to hang on until that wheel starts its round up again. But while you're waiting for that, there are things you can change. And that's what I want you to pay attention to. So no matter how desperate you feel, I want you to understand that you have options, and they are many. I'm going to make recommendations in this podcast for natural solutions for your dark mood and depression. I'm going to suggest a couple of supplements at the end of this for you to research and discuss with whoever your medical care provider is, because I can't recommend that you take a supplement, and because I don't know what other supplements and medications you're on, I don't know if there's any interactions that would be bad for these supplements, but I'm going to put that ownership onto you. Write down the supplements that I'm recommending and then discuss it with whoever your medical care provider is. There is a cognitive behavioral therapy that is a form of talk therapy that's focused on changing patterns of thinking and behaviors that don't support mental health. That's an avenue that you can go on. You can find somebody who practices cognitive behavioral therapy. People who undergo this form of therapy find new methods of coping that help them dramatically. It helps them face whatever their fear is. Now, I used to be a person who lived in fear all the time. I was always scared to death to get up in front of a crowd or to do this or to do that. The only person in my whole life that held me back from accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish was me. And I was probably in my late 40s, early 50s when I figured that out. So cognitive therapy will help you face your fears. It's awful to have that voice going on in your head. It will help you develop confidence. It will help you learn to calm your mind. It will use problem-solving skills to deal with tough situations. And there are several emerging treatments for depression available. Things like bright light therapy, which involves daily exposure to full spectrum 10,000 lux light and has been shown to relieve seasonal affective disorder and depression. And there's something called EMDR, which is a form of therapy that stimulates the two hemispheres of your brain, often through eye movement and specialized devices that originally were intended as a treatment for trauma, but it's shown to be extremely effective for recurrent depression. So look those two things up. I just read an article about stress relief by laying down and going through rapid eye movements, which has found to help people with stress dramatically, which is an alternative to the breathing exercises that I do for stress. So look that up, because that might be something that not only would help you lower your stress, but that would lighten your mood. What cognitive therapy would do is build your ability to adapt to any circumstance. And cultivating more adaptability is a powerful tool to use when dealing with depression. This is a crucial trait we need to deal with uncertainty, and clearly we need it now more than ever. With all this isolation, and remember, the community is the number one thing on the list by the Blue Zones for health. We haven't been able to be in a lot of community in the last couple of years. So we've all adjusted, but it has caused its own set of problems for us and for our children. The crucial trait that we all need to deal with is uncertainty, and clearly we need to do it now more than ever. We can each develop the internal and external resources needed for this, often described with the acronym HERO, which in positive psychology is known as psychological capital. HERO stands for hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. Classic signs of depression: oversleeping, even during daytime hours, trouble sleeping at night, or in other words, insomnia, loss of interest in the activities you always used to enjoy, social withdrawal, irritability, anxiety, feeling guilty or hopeless, low energy levels, decreased sex drive, inability to focus or concentrate, changes in appetite, typically either having an increased appetite and cravings for carbohydrates and sweets, which results in overeating and, frankly, just continues the cycle to damper all your feel-good moods, or a sudden weight gain or weight loss, changes in appetite that actually you're not eating enough to feed your body the phytonutrients that you need. Isolation is an early sign, because if you have a loved one that is isolating, encourage them that it's okay to be blue and it's okay to talk about it with you. And then you have to create a safe zone so that they can talk about it with you. And I'm going to talk about some ways that you can do that. Or with somebody who is non-judgmental. Doesn't have to be you, but it has to be somebody who provides a non-judgmental, quiet space where they can go down into the well and bring up whatever it is that's frustrating and bothering them. Those who are depressed, by the way, tend to have a reduced sense of smell. So if your loved one has a reduced sense of smell, that's one of your first early signs that they might be actually going under the dark cloud of depression. Depression is something that isn't outwardly always that easy to recognize. And I think that's why loved ones sometimes are shocked if the person does decide to take their own life into their hands. And one of the things I'm going to have my husband, who produces my podcast, do is flash up the hotline for suicide at several places during this podcast so that you can seek help from people who deal with it every day. I want you to seek the help that's available. And one of the neat things that I discovered in looking into the suicide hotline is by the end of this summer, there's going to be a 3-digit code that you can dial in if you need the suicide hotline for a loved one or if you need the suicide hotline for yourself. Most people who are on the verge of suicide don't really want to do it. They want somebody to stop them. And that's why the suicide hotline can be so effective. So make sure you put that on your refrigerator, you put that on your bathroom mirror, and you don't get to the point where you can't find that number and utilize it when it's necessary. There is no one characteristic that can be clearly defined and pointed to that will demonstrate that someone is actually depressed. And there are a lot of people who are functional depressants. People who suffer from it only display signs in a very concealed way. These areas touch upon signs that you yourself are covering up or someone that you care about is. Number one, lifestyle coping habits cycle around those things that others would only use occasionally. Those who find themselves constantly unable to scrape themselves out of bed and get started with their day have lost their methods, their normal methods of coping. These habits tend to push the boundaries of what others would see as healthy or sustainable, whether it's excessive drinking, taking drugs, excessive exercising, driving too fast, eating too much, or a horrible diet that's punishing, or doing anything else that's distracting them. It's all a way to make the darkness stay at bay. Number two, emphasis is always going to be on perfectly fine. I used to tease with my friends that if you ask me how I am and I say I'm fine, I just very well might not be. But if I tell you I'm not, I'm probably doing good, because I'm open to talk about it and talk it out. So know that if somebody keeps telling you when you ask them how they're doing, I'm fine, that doesn't mean they are. That could be the red flag to tell you that that person needs your empathy and needs you to get quiet and to touch their hearts and to listen to what's going on. People who are depressed have gotten very good at functioning in a way that hides right below the surface. And people do not just snap out of it. So for God's sakes, don't tell somebody to do that. People hide it because they don't want anyone to realize that they are not capable of dealing with their life or their emotions. They don't want anyone to believe that they have mental illness. They don't want anyone asking prodding questions. There is a series of advertising going on right now that's talking about how mental illness is like any other illness, and it's okay to talk about it. The ads sort of take it to an extreme, but they make their point, like a guy who can't lift the heavy bar with weights up, and somebody asks him if he needs help, and he says, no, I can deal with it myself. That could be somebody who's dealing with mental illness. So look out for those ads and pay attention to them, because that could be you or a loved one. And there is nothing wrong for asking for help if you're feeling like you're in a dark mood or struggling with a mental illness. The best thing you can do is sit down with a loved one and ask if something is up. And then you have to get quiet and let the person answer. Now, I tend to talk a lot, so this has been a skill I have had to learn. You can lovingly comment on what you observed, but only are there really to listen. The silence becomes deafening, setting up the need for the silence to be filled. So you ask the question, you show your empathy, and then you shut the heck up. The first time that the person will go down to the well, they will only bring up what's on the top water of that well. The first time they dip in, they bring up the most superficial answer. So do not comment. Do not agree with them. Do not say, oh yes, I understand. Just remain silent. It's hard to do, but it's a skill you can learn. What you want is for that person to go back down into the well, and this time to go a little deeper. Same response on your point. When you ask them again, what's bothering you? You've now asked them a second time, then you shut the heck up again. And that whatever they say, you do not answer. You let them go down again for a second dip, and what they're going to bring up is still not what's really at the bottom of that well. It takes at least 3 dips before they're going to dip into the well and start to get to the crux of matter. And they're only going to do that if you don't fill up the silence with noise. So if you can stay quiet and let them go down 3 times, you're going to finally start to get to what the crux of the issue is. Keep your face kind and empathetic, and let them talk no matter what it is that they share with you. That being said, depression makes someone really good at covering things up. In the beginning, what you're going to get is the cover-up story. Know that they will use one. Expect it. And stay silent while they give it to you. Depression takes many twists and turns, and some days it makes a whole mess of our best laid plans. The excuse will sound perfectly plausible and completely benign in order to misdirect attention away from what's really happening down there at the bottom of the well. Sometimes it's even a cover-up that the person will believe it themselves, in which case it's even more important to follow up with them when you suspect they haven't given you the whole truth. One of the big reasons for the dark mood and for the depression is a fear of abandonment. And it is a very real fear. It will take trust for them to open up to you, and this goes doubly for somebody who struggles with depression. They understand the weight of their troubles, they are being crushed by them every day, and they want to pass that weight off on somebody else. They most likely won't want to worry you, which is a large factor in them not wanting to share what's going on. And you have to make it clear that you love them no matter what. And it's okay. And it would be kinder for them to include you in what's gone on than to wall you out. And if they're having a hard time going down and bringing up what the crux of that issue is, what I want you to do is direct them to a mental care professional, because they are skilled at opening up the floor for the person to get a comfort level to share their deepest and darkest truths. Now, I only went through therapy once, and I can tell you it was an absolutely delicious experience. So don't be afraid to get a mental health professional to help you, because if somebody at the other end of you who is there solely to listen to you talk about your deepest, darkest fears and problems, it's really wonderful that somebody is putting all that attention on you so that you can get the hand to climb back out of the hole. They, the people fear that when they do share and open themselves up to you, you might not love them anymore and you won't be there anymore. And you need to let them know, no matter what, you love them unconditionally. And as you direct them towards a mental care professional, you'll be there to support them as they go through the process. Number 5, substances are looked at in a different light by a depressed person. A depressed person is acutely aware of what their triggers are. They probably are aware of what happens in their head when they eat this or they eat that. When they get into the conversation deeper, you can ask them what their triggers are or how they make them feel. So don't be afraid to ask that. And the things that people do are drinking, smoking, eating, taking medication, and taking drugs. They all carry a weight of experience that most healthy people will never understand. And the key is to make your loved one feel safe enough to open up about it. Sleeping and eating habits may be expressed abnormally. The two easiest things that can be consciously manipulated are your eating and sleeping habits, or your loved one's eating and sleeping habits. They may sleep in very late or go to bed very late. They may eat everything in sight, or they may eat nothing at all. This is a way that they're coping with the crushing feelings and thoughts that they're experiencing now every day, and it's much clearer sign to people around them that they need love and support when they're going through this, and expect some pushback. Just keep creating a safe and loving, judgment-free zone so that they can reach out to you and finally come and start to share what's going on. Conversations about life and death will be very involved with this person. Although they might not be headed towards suicide, and I don't want you to assume that they are, someone is struggling with on and off depression has thought about how they feel about death. You may only notice this when conversations turn to more esoteric or deeper thoughts, and you'll probably be surprised on how eloquent and well thought out this person's ideas about death are. Take note of this and ask the kind of questions that a caring friend or loving family member would ask. Cries for help are going to come in subtle ways. There's going to be a time when it's just too much for them to bear. Hopefully this is when they'll reach out, or when you will reach out to them and give you a glimpse into whatever the inner working is going on in their mind. When this happens is when you will finally see your friend or your loved one opening up to you. It's very important to be there, to listen, and to acknowledge their pain, but to stay quiet so that they get to share. It's not about you. It's all about them. To offer your arm or your hand and to see them for who they really are and love them for it anyway is what you want to do. This will be the bridge that can help them climb back out of the hole they've gotten into and hopefully put them on a path to freeing themselves from their daily struggle, or you helping them find the help that they need to free themselves from the struggle. 10. Finding a purpose to be here is important for recovery. If people lose their purpose, which is one of the big things for health by the blue zones, which is where the happiest people in the world live, we all need to have some kind of a purpose. And a depressed person will question what their purpose is and needs a purpose even more. So no matter who we are, or what we may be or have, or where we come from, it is a human trait to be seeking something more. So you might want to ask them what their purpose is, and if they don't have one, help them find one. One of the best things a depressed person can do is help somebody else, because believe it or not, that might just be enough to break the cycle. And in healing, I have discovered when you are ready to start to help somebody else is when you're ready to start to heal. So make a recommendation that they find some group or somebody to help who's going through what they're going through. Because if that could give them purpose, that might just be the key to helping them out. No matter what, they are in need of love and acceptance. Someone who's depressed isn't being deceptive. They are protective of themselves. If you found it difficult to face the light coming in your window every morning, day after day, and you don't understand the worth that your life has, you are probably suffering from depression. So opening up and exposing the darkness you carry is the first step, or allowing a loved one to open up and expose the darkness they're carrying. If you see that someone you love isn't feeling well, you must let them know that you are there for them. Do what you can to give them the start they're looking for to get out from under the burden. And however it works out, you and they are worth it. One of the things that happens if you're one left behind to someone who does commit suicide is you torture yourself for what you didn't see and what you could have done. So do everything you can now so that you don't put yourself through that. Whatever's going on has nothing to do with you. So you can try to be there, but if they won't share, that's not on you, that's on them. But at least create the space so that they know that you're safe and that they can come and share. Causes of depression. Inflammation prospectively predicts depression, but depression does not predict inflammation in older age. In other words, if you have an unhealthy gut, which leads to inflammation, which leads to all of our chronic illnesses, which are autoimmune disease, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, liver disease, all that stuff, and depression. It starts with inflammation. That's the door that opens up the gut to misbehave and to start leaking through and creating inflammation. And we've talked about leaky gut on several of my podcasts. Leaky gut is a condition where the intestinal barrier allows undesirable and incompatible substances from the gut to leak into the bloodstream. Our gut lining is tissue paper thin. That's shocked me. Our gut lining is only one cell wide. So if our gut is not digesting our food properly, those big chunks start to push up on that tissue paper thin lining. And when they break a hole into it and start to leak into our bloodstream, that's what the functional medical community calls leaky gut. When that happens, our immune system does exactly what it's supposed to do. It screams attack. And then the body does something really interesting. Wherever we are weak, that mimics those tissues so that our body starts to attack those tissues. For me, it was my joints and my muscles, which I went under extreme pain with. But for some people, it could be the brain, which might affect moods or which might give you Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. It might be the lower gut, which would be IBS. It might be the liver, which would become fatty liver. It might be your kidneys. It might be your lungs. It might be your heart. Wherever you, might be your muscles and your joints like me. Wherever it is, your body's going to attack you there. And because there is a direct connection from your gut bacteria to your brain through the vagus nerve, there is a direct connection to turning on your feel-good moods and turning them off. Our gut bacteria manufacture 95% of our body's supply of serotonin, which influences both our mood and our GI activity. And later on in part 2 of this podcast, I'm going to talk about all the feel-good hormones and the things that you can do to make sure that you have plenty of them and not the hormones that are turning off because you're eating the standard American diet and sugar, which dulls all your feel-good hormones. You have to start eating nutritious food. You have to eat the rainbow. You need all those now 50,000 phytonutrients. It keeps going up every time I research. They keep discovering more phytonutrients that the plants make for themselves, but which have all kinds of huge benefits for our body. And if you're eating dead food that's only chemicals, you're not getting any of that. So start eating the rainbow. And my whole phrase is eat the rainbow from a farm as close to you as possible, because the closer you eat it to being picked, the more active phytonutrients you're getting into your diet, which supports healthy communication in the brain and reduces chronic inflammation. Food directly impacts mood. So every morning when you get up, I want you to look in the mirror. You've heard me say this before, and have a conversation with yourself. How you feeling today? I do it every morning. And if I'm not feeling good, I go through my brain and I try to figure out what did I do yesterday that has dampened my mood or caused me pain. And I adjust immediately. Why do I do that? Because I have learned just how good it does feel to feel good, and I am not going back. So get into the motion of asking yourself how you feel. The body's incredibly smart. And if you do that every morning and then you get quiet, remember that quiet? You got to let yourself go down to that well and bring up what's going on as well. Your body will vote, and it will tell you if you've been doing the right things or the wrong things to promote your health. I've talked a lot about the science behind eating the phytonutrients and what they do, so you can go back and you can listen to earlier podcasts. But in order to get the right signal sent to your brain to stimulate your feel-good hormones, you need to eat the right food, which will start to raise your mood. The first thing I do if my mood is blue is I know that I'm going to eat more, especially greens, because greens for me seem to turn my mood around right away. And greens also impact the heart, and the heart itself is a brain. It is your intuitive center. So it's good to feed the green and feed your intuitive center of your heart. This is your first line of defense. We are what we eat, so our gut bacteria are also what we eat. I started this podcast saying that. You want the community of gut bacteria that loves organic fruits and vegetables without all the toxins and the poisons that have been sprayed on them. And then the brain-gut axis will immediately influence your moods and mental state in a positive way. Studies have shown linking eating the rainbow to mental health. They have also shown that the standard American diet leads directly to depression because sugar leads to depression. Never forget, food quality matters, and what you feed your body matters. We know that sugar lights up the brain like a pinball machine, and it feeds the dopamine, which is one of your feel-good hormones, to go into excess and your oxytocin, because the sugar stimulates that part of the brain. But what happens is your brain utilizes it and eats it up. So then you crash, and then your body starts screaming, I want more. And so by wanting more, the addiction to the sugar has to be fed. So you go back and you eat more processed food and chemicals so that you get the pinball machine again, so that you feel great for that moment in time, and then bam, you crash again. One of the other things that happens is it impacts your blood sugar insulin, and that directly impacts your moods. You start having highs and lows depending upon your blood sugar level, but it impacts all your other hormones as well. As an offside, it impacts your two hunger hormones so that the addiction stays in place because the sugar protects itself. But it also influences your dopamine and your GABA, your serotonin, and there are a couple other really feel-good hormones that just can't operate properly because this huge excess of dopamine, which then doesn't produce itself fast enough to replace itself, is shooting into your brain and affecting your moods. The factor that determines which microbes thrive in your gut and which won't is your diet. And since your gut bacteria eat what you eat, this is something I want you to think about. If you're only eating dead food, you're only getting angry gut bacteria. And the key is to eat enough of the good stuff that you crowd out all the bad stuff and that it goes away. It's in part due to the community of bacteria and other tiny organisms that live in your intestinal tract, which are sending chemicals to your body and your brain, and that gut-brain axis will continue to feed your feel-good hormones or damper them. You also need omega 3 oils instead of all of the omega-6 oils that are in processed food. And the omega-3s also impact mood and health. A healthy diet emphasizes plenty of plant foods that keeps you healthy and happy. While this not be the case for everyone, changing your diet to feel better is your first step that you control that's in the right direction towards focusing on your mental health and spirituality. Spices are very anti-inflammatory powerhouses, including turmeric, ginger, and rosemary. Now, I use turmeric and ginger for pain control because I no longer take over-the-counter pain medications, and they work as well or better with no downside. They are very powerful. So you want to incorporate those herbs and spices into what you're putting into your body as well. Meat cooked with spices neutralizes any potential inflammation, and if you're eating grass-fed, grass-finished meats, you're eating meat that has eaten his own species-specific diet, so he's not going to be likely to create as much inflammation because he's creating health in your body and your gut. Omega-3 fats are found in wild foods, fish, seafood, and some nuts and seeds, and they are very powerfully anti-inflammation. Mushrooms, including shiitake, maitake, reishi, chaga, turkey tail, cordyceps, all have powerful immune-regulating and anti-cancer compounds called polysaccharides. And foods and vitamins and minerals boost your immunity and reduce inflammation, including vitamin C, zinc, selenium, vitamin D alone, which you need. You need to get out into the sun at least 5 minutes every day to help your vitamin D and, believe it or not, to help you sleep at the end of the day, which also impacts your mood. But you also probably need vitamin D supplementation, so have your allopathic or conventional doctor check you for your vitamin D and your magnesium every time you see them because they need each other. They bond together to regulate hundreds of enzyme reactions in your body, which then impact your mood. Vitamin D alone regulates hundreds of genes that affect inflammation and immunity. So a meal of guavas and parsley, which are high in vitamin C, pumpkin seeds and oysters, which are high in zinc, Brazil nuts and sardines, which are high in selenium. You only need 1 Brazil nut a day to keep your selenium at the right level. Pretty amazing. And porcini mushrooms and herring, which are very high in vitamin D. They're all immune-boosting, anti-inflammatory super substances for you to eat. And not sure you can make it with all these ingredients, but start adding them one at a time because each step is a step closer to health. Other things to do in your diet are to avoid sugar and fake sugars as they disrupt your gut bacteria. Drink adequate water that has been filtered for the toxins and avoid plastic. Water also impacts your gut bacteria. That's a new finding. So you want to filter your water and you want to drink adequate water, which is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 60 ounces. Drink it with lemon in it. Lemon makes it alkaline so that it's very appreciated by your gut. Find solutions to release your stress. You can do the rapid eye movement thing, look it up, look up Dr. Andrew Weil on YouTube and learn to do his breath exercise. All of that is really good. And there's a new film coming out that I strongly recommend called Love Heals. You can look up Love Heals the movie right on Facebook and go to their group. And it's about all the mind, body, spirit things that you can do that will not only be good for your mood, but good for whatever chronic pain you might be dealing with. And it actually chronicles a woman who had horrific chronic pain and went on a journey to discover the mind-body connection. And although she still does have chronic pain, she has made giant steps back towards health. And it's the best explanation of all of the forms of mindfulness that you can practice to help your gut, to help your diet, to help your body, to help your brain, and to connect you with something greater than yourself. Get 7.5 hours of continuous sleep. Again, if you're not, Your brain isn't getting rid of all the plaque that's developing in it, and you're impacting your gut in a negative way. A study of 840,000 people found that shifting sleeping time 1 hour earlier could actually decrease the risk of major depression by 23%. And why is that? Because they're getting up when the sun is up, so they're getting additional sun, which is feeding their vitamin D, which is improving their mood. So if you're having dark moods, try getting up when the sun is just coming up so that you get to take advantage of that. Earlier risers get a cascade of hormonal impacts that influence their mood. And others note that having a biological clock or circadian rhythm that trends differently than other people's in itself could be depressing. So if you're not sleeping when other people are sleeping, if you are sleeping and it's not when other people are sleeping, it can impact your mood negatively. The last things in terms of lifestyle, and we'll go into these a little more fully in the second podcast, is get outdoors and into nature, even if it's only for a 15-minute walk. If I get into nature, it is practically impossible for me not to be in awe of what a wondrous world we live in and to be out there in nature and see all those things. It could be as simple as going to your local park. It could be getting into the mountains or going to the movies, going to the beach, or it could be as simple as bringing all your houseplants and putting them in front of you and looking at those, or staring out the window for 15 minutes and enjoying the outdoors. All of that can make a difference in how you feel about life because you are spending time with nature. I talked about the importance of breathing and stress exercises and the importance of understanding that inflammation is the language that the body speaks, expressing imbalance, inviting change. We usually suppress these symptoms with medication, but it's like turning off the smoke alarm when you see a fire going on. You want to make sure that you read the signs that inflammation is creating in your body, and you want to react to them by adopting these lifestyle changes so that you lower the fire. The functional medical community believes that if you stop pouring gasoline on the fire, which is inflammation, by making all these lifestyle changes, you can come under control for your inflammation and start to heal from the inside out. And that includes all the junk that's feeding your bad microbes in your gut, making them angry and less healthy, sending that signal to your brain that's causing brain fog and depression. So if you're eating processed food, conventional meat, and all those chemicals that are in processed food, you are feeding discomfort and imbalance in your gut. And then we'll start next week with the rest of the things that you can do and all the things you can do to have healthy hormones in your body, which will help you get control of your moods by physical changes in your body that will support your mind-gut connection and take away the dark cloud that you're under. Okay, so this is part 1 of depression. And next week, we will go into part 2 and get into some of the nitty-gritties of things that you can do directly. Because I'm not big into just explaining why. I want you to know how. I hate it when people only give me the why and don't tell me the how, so that I don't know how to proceed and how to correct it. So next week, we'll go into the how. Thank you so much for joining me. Whether you are feeling dark or a loved one is feeling dark, I hope you've made some notes, because these are all important things that I wish I had known when I had loved ones going through this, so that I might have been able to help and still have them here in my life. And I want you to be able to help and still have them here in yours. So thank you. Join me again next week for part 2 on depression and the lifestyle changes you can make to support your body. Hello, Could I see a show of hands if there's anybody out there like me who's tried to lose weight their whole life and not been successful? So you've tried all the different diets available. You've tried Weight Watcher. You've tried Jenny Craig. You've tried all the New York Times bestsellers. And the last time you did it, you started off great, just like all the other times. And you started losing weight, and then all of a sudden you fell off the horse. And before you know it, you're eating fast food and processed food again with all that sugar, and you don't even know why. And in the end, you've gained more weight than where you started out. So you now are beating yourself up that you just don't have the willpower to win. If that's you, I want to address the elephant in the room, because 9 years ago, I got autoimmune disease and started researching because I didn't want the pain that came with the autoimmune disease, and the added benefit was I lost the weight along the way. So let me tell you what happens. Big Food doesn't want you to win. They've rigged the system. They've put so many chemicals into fast food and processed food that they light up the brain like a pinball machine. It's the same part of the brain that goes off for cocaine and heroin, and you feel great when you eat that food, but it's not making you feel good, and you're starving your body for nutrition because it's loaded with empty calories, so you're getting fat eating that food, and it's not giving your body what you need. And it's turning off all your own feel-good hormones of serotonin and dopamine and even your insulin, which keep your moods even. But worse than that, there's two little hormones here at the back of your neck called ghrelin and leptin, and they don't work, and they regulate your appetite because all those chemicals have subdued them, so you don't even know when you're full. So what did I learn to do instead? I'm eating the GLAD diet, loaded with all the phytonutrients that my body needs to be healthy and to thrive and to boost my immune system and to ditch the pain. And along the way of eating all this live food, I lost 60 pounds without dieting. You see, I was starving my body for nutrition when I was eating the standard American diet, and now that I'm giving my body all those beautiful phytonutrients, it's not holding on to it anymore, so it's just dropping it automatically. So don't eat the standard American diet. I don't want you to get a standard American disease, and I certainly don't want you to die the standard American death. Instead, start eating the GLAD diet, because by eating all those beautiful phytonutrients, you will be healthier and you will live long and thrive. Thank you.